And good morning, Boquete. This is Al Stefanelli. You're listening to BoqueteNOW Talk Radio on Radio Cherokee 103.3 on the FM band. We are here live every Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. We're sponsored by Big Daddy's Grill and the ACCB. That's the ACCB Boquete charity. You guys, you know who they are. They've been on the show a bunch of times. I do want to tell you one thing about the ACCB. They're having their duck race. Let's see. It says here we go. Duck race starts at 1:30. Opens at 1:30. The races start at 2 o'clock. The winner gets 10% of the pot. You can buy a duck, rent a duck. I guess buy a duck, right? You know, for I think it's $10, and you get a little rubber duck, and they start at the top of the. They meet actually at tap out. They're not really telling you where the race starts because of COVID. They don't want a bunch of people gathering down by the riverfront, and you don't want to spread COVID, right? So this is not meant to be a super spreader event, but it is for charity though. So basically. This raises money to bring Easter gifts for disadvantaged children, and that's like always a really good cause, you know. So you can go to the ACC Boquete Facebook page, and there's all the information there of how you can get involved in this, and it's a really good cause. So just wanted to let you know about that. So. Guess who I have on my show today? If you haven't read everything I've posted over the last week, it's Dr. Paul Myers.
You bet.
And you know, if you haven't listened to or watched a show with Dr. Myers here, you've missed out, because this guy is an expert on rocks. Right? He's a geologist, right? You're a retired professor of geology. I believe that is what you are.
Yeah, you got to get tired first, and then you get retired.
And you get retired.
Some people have claimed that I'm retired.
You know, if you put an LLY, you're really tired.
That's right.
You're retired and really.
Yeah.
But I've known Paul here for going, I guess, almost 3 years.
Oh yeah,
now.
at least that.
And before COVID, which I guess we can call that BC, right? Before COVID, he would give these tours, these educational tours. When you were like the last one, we all met at the Oasis. There's probably a dozen of us in 3 cars, and he'd take us to all these
cool places.
Yeah, really cool geological sites, and explain why things are the way they are, and how these rocks got here, and what these striations in the dirt walls, rock walls mean. And if you're a little bit of a nerd like me, this stuff's really cool. It always fascinates me how our environment has come to be the way it is. And of course, living where we do, we have this little thing called Volcan Baru. little. And that's just a fascinating subject just on its own.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Myers here is our resident expert on Baruology, as it were. And he's I really I can't wait till we can go on those tours again. Those I guess they're not tours; they're more or less roving classrooms.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to talk about that.
And it's really let me adjust my mic here. Sorry for all that noise. It's really interesting when you when you have it explained to you by someone who knows what they're talking about. It's nice to you read the reviews on like TripAdvisor. Boquete is a nice little mountain pueblo at the base of a volcano, and it's got a little blurb. Volcan Baru is yada yada yada, and then you move on. And you're like, well, wait a minute. You can't just throw that in there. You're at the base of a volcano and then move on to something else. Hold up a little bit.
Gee whiz,
So we're going to talk about, Baru, how long it's been there, I guess eruption history, a lot of people, and when I say a lot, I mean probably 24 people since Paul was on the show last, have asked, so when is that thing going to blow? How much time are we going to have to escape? And I try. My memory's not what it should be, right? So I'll type a little thing. Well, you'll have plenty of time. It's not like Hawaii, where you have like 8 minutes to escape a pyroclastic cloud. We're going to discuss what that is too. Anyway, there's a lot to cover here. So welcome back to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Al.
It's always good to have you here, and
I always look forward to these times.
So we're there's new people here. Since they opened the borders up again and allowed people to to come visit or move here or rent or buy property. And I know that many of you have listened to these shows before, but many of you haven't. So I'd like to start off with maybe a little history of our grandfather over here, grandfather mountain.
Abuelo.
Montaña Abuelo, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, one of the things that I have learned here about this place and leading field trips here, which we call it.
Field trips. Right, yeah. Okay.
So we're going to be renewing our program of field trips very soon now. So keep your eyes open and your ears open for announcements, because often these field trips fill up very fast. So we always go. Every field trip has a waiting list. Mm-hmm. So when you hear about it, don't delay. Get your name on the list as quickly as you can. But I mean, the field trips are ways of coming closer to the realities of living on the site of a volcano that is going to erupt again someday. We don't know when, and anybody that tries to tell you when it's going to erupt has got something wrong with his head. Yeah. I think that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, is it? Again, you're predicting these things is like trying to I guess pull a rabbit out of a hat.
And you always ask you always have to ask the question, so what if I could tell you the minute that
right?
was going to erupt, would you believe me? Well,
I know
80% of the people would say, oh, that's just fake news,
Yeah.
And they just go right on with dinner. So even if I told you when it was going to erupt, would you believe me in the first place? And even if you did believe me, then what would you do about it?
Yeah.
So
well, doesn't that speak though to the type of volcano that it is?
Well, sure. And one of the things about this particular volcano, Baru, is it's very, very unusual and very, very unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kind of like my ex-wife, right?
He's a weirdo type, and he only wakes up, on average, about every 400 years.
Yeah.
400 years. But we've got records for the last 1,600 years.
Right.
And over those 1,600 years, it's erupted fairly strongly about 4 times.
Mm-hmm. And when was the last time that it erupted?
Around 15 something or other, 1520.
So about 500 years.
Yeah, 500 years. Yeah. So it's if you start looking at statistics, you could say, well, it's 100 years overdue. And then you start to get nervous, and you call me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well,
is an earthquake
erupting yet?
Is there anything yet?
Well, can you help me sell my house?
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Yeah, I know, right?
But
it is very unpredictable, though. So there's no way to say, there's no time clock. There's no timekeeper with the little on-off switch down there at the bottom. It's been 400 years. Click.
There might be, but we don't know. We don't know what he's going to do either.
Hey, if you're listening from Disney, that'd be a great idea for a new animated cartoon,
Oh, it
right?
would.
The volcano timekeeper from Pixar, right? That would be cool. But no, that's it's interesting because as a species, we see patterns in everything.
Yeah.
We're always looking for something to explain anything in our existence, and more often than not, we attach a pattern to it. So when you look at something major like a comet approaching, or a volcano, or the big earthquake that's going to be coming in San Francisco, and all that, we tend to look at, well, when's the last time it happened, and when's the time that it happened before that. So
this is making the naive assumption that you're going to be able to do anything about it.
well, yeah, what are you going to do, right?
So
you can
even if you knew the minute it was going to erupt, that wouldn't change things very much.
probably not. No.
No.
Well, can you? I know you can. So will you give us a brief, I guess, a description of a couple of different types of volcanoes, and what happens when they erupt? Because most of us, we're used to the science fiction movies, right? When the top blows off and lava comes squirting down, and everyone's running for their lives and all of that.
So I'll give you a typical scenario for Abuelo Maru, based upon what we can see and read in the rocks of the volcano and in the scenery around us, which is what we do when we go on field trips. In addition to that, we could probably put it all together and make a story out of it, and that story gives us an idea about his behavior. First off, this is one of a whole string of volcanoes that form a ring around the Pacific Ocean basin. The whole Pacific Ocean is surrounded almost continuously, at least along the continental margins.
So that's the Ring of Fire, right?
By the Ring of Fire, yeah. Those volcanoes are produced because the Pacific Ocean basin is shrinking. And as the Pacific Ocean basin shrinks, the continents around it are pushed toward it, closing it up. But the ocean basin I'm talking about, the actual structure in the Earth's crust, is a basin structure which is surrounded by a ring of mountains that are volcanic.
And this is mostly underwater, right? Or not?
They're island. They're what they call island arcs, like the Japanese islands and many of the islands of the Western Pacific, Southwestern. In Indonesia, whole island groups are produced where a piece of a section of the ocean crust, which is the same rock that you see when you go to Hawaii.
Okay, all right.
You go to Hawaii and you're going to see a black volcanic rock coming out, spurting out, and flowing down the sides into the ocean. That is basalt. That's what the ocean crust is made of.
All right.
Basalt. Okay. That crust, as the ocean basin closes, the crust is pushed down under the continents around it.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, because it's heavier and denser than the crust around it, the continents are floating on the ocean crust.
Okay.
And it's that.
That explains the way continents move and
so
shift
as
and all
this
that.
ocean closes, the continents all around it are pushed up over that crust that's going down under it. Okay. It goes down, or they call this subduction. Okay. The crust, the basalt ocean crust, is going down under the continents. The continents are like pancakes, sort of floating on the top. And so the crust goes down, and it keeps going down until around 35 to 40 miles down. It starts to melt. That basalt crust starts to melt.
Okay.
Well, basalt or any rock, if you put it in an oven, you will find that it doesn't all melt at the same temperature.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
it melts across a huge range of temperatures. It starts to melt at about 600 degrees centigrade,
Mm-hmm.
and it keeps on melting, more and more liquid formed, and more solid material or the solid material part of it is taken up, is melted.
Is that what the lava is? It's molten.
The lava
molten rock?
is made is molten rock. Yeah.
Okay.
So now but that basalt crust does not melt at the same time.
Right,
It
okay.
melts over a long period of time, and as this crust is pushed down underneath.
All right.
Okay, so it forms a liquid, and that liquid starts to rise right up through the continental crust that's on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
It pushes its way up through, and it spurts out at some distance from the ocean.
Okay.
Okay.
So that would be the distance that it travels
yeah,
under.
you can see it goes down, It gets hotter, hotter.
So it's not just going straight. It's going
It's
actually
going down
underneath.
at an angle, maybe
Okay.
50 degrees.
Okay.
Like that's about the average angle here in
Right.
in Panama. 50 degrees down. Okay, so now part of it melts, and that part of it is what comes up here at Baru.
Okay, that's the actual
That's
volcano.
part-
the actual.
Yeah,
okay.
that's the molten. But you see, the basalt is a different kind of rock from the rock that is formed as this melt that comes out at Baru is a
Okay.
different kind of melt.
All right.
It's the early melt. It's melted at a lower temperature than you'd have if it were basalt.
Okay.
All right. We call that andesite.
Andesite.
And that andesite is for the Andes Mountains.
Oh, okay.
And they're the mountains all along the whole west coast of South America, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And there, if you've got the ocean, the shore, and then a row of volcanoes parallel to the coast.
Right.
All right?
And that's all throughout the coastline of Central and South America?
That's right.
Okay.
And North America and Eastern Asia.
So
and
North America, is that the same group, excuse, that the same group of mountains that make up the Rocky Mountains? Is that the same? I'm trying, I have an image in my head. I look at, there's the Rockies, there's the Andes.
Okay, now you look at a map of California, okay? And what you see is the coast and a bunch of cliffs, okay? And very steep rocky shoreline. And then inshore, a row of volcanoes parallel to the coast
Okay.
in the eastern part of the Cascade Mountains.
The Cascade Mountains.
In Oregon, Washington,
Okay.
and then the Sierra Nevada
Okay. Yeah.
in California, and,
I need to brush up on my geology a little
and
bit.
then all the way around Alaska and the Aleutian Islands,
Uh-huh.
and so on. All those are volcanoes. They ring all the way around.
Okay.
Okay, so this volcano here is andesite.
Mm-hmm. That's the actual makeup of the actual
That's
volcano.
the actual chemistry of the rock is of an andesite. So now that erupts in a certain way
Okay.
because it tends to have a lot of gas in it.
Uh-huh.
Of course, water is a gas or a vapor
Yeah.
at very high temperature. And so when the eruption happens, we're going to know about it probably years in advance.
So there's plenty of time.
So we got plenty of time to sell the house.
Find someone to buy the
You
house
don't have
that
to,
has no
you
idea.
don't have to drive away. Somebody's going to say, well, it's going to erupt in another 16 hours.
No.
There's no way that, of course, there are eruptions and then there are eruptions. And there are all different kinds of eruptions.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've learned is that Volcan Baru is the kind of a volcano that is very difficult to predict how it will erupt, when it will erupt,
Right.
or where it will erupt.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's three basic unknowns.
Yeah, how, when, and where, right? Yeah.
Right.
That's comforting.
Yeah. So
But it's still that same, you'll have plenty of there'll be
you've still
indicators
got lots
and
of warning time. So basically, what you'll see happening as a warning is you'll get gas and steam coming out of the vent areas, probably near the summit of Baru somewhere. Okay. And those gases include hydrogen sulfide gas, which smells like rotten eggs.
Oh, ooh, ew.
So if you smell rotten eggs,
And you have no eggs in your house.
that's right, and it's coming from outside the house, that's a good sign that there may be something happening down underneath Baru. Another thing that normally precedes an eruption is clusters of earthquakes.
Okay. Are those local?
You get frequent earthquakes coming from one place.
Okay, so not these little 2, 3, 4 pointers that one's in
No,
Costa Rica,
well,
one's in.
They would be coming from, because as that magma is pushing, that molten rock is pushing its way up through the crust, it makes earthquakes.
Okay, so they'd be all centered around the general area here.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. So as that actually the seismologists are able to actually pinpoint the source of each of those earthquakes, and they can actually almost see it coming up toward the surface. Like you can do surgery inside your body without hardly
Breaking the skin.
You don't have to cut it all
Yeah,
open. You can see where it is inside you by using ultrasound and other things. So we can actually pinpoint. We can see, in a sense, that magma rising up underneath the volcano.
Yeah.
Another thing that happens is that the volcano starts to swell up as the magma rises up and pushes up underneath it.
Oh.
It causes the volcano to do this. It's just swelling up.
So you just make like more of a peak than it is now.
Yeah,
Because it looks like the whole top of the thing was blown off at one point.
Well, it does. But we had on our field trips, we asked the question, was it ever one of those perfect volcanoes, like you see in the picture book?
Yeah. And perfect cone. Yeah.
And I believe that it's not likely that it ever was.
Okay, so that's pretty much it.
It may be what it has looked like for a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
But when it erupts, you're gonna know it.
Yeah. Now, is it? And I know. We've talked about this before, but just humor me here because a few people have said, okay, well, when it does erupt, not necessarily, do we have to get in a car and drive away, but what type of an eruption it is, and how will it affect, the valley here, Boquete, Alto Boquete, whatever.
Okay. One of the aspects of Baru specifically is it tends to erupt explosively. Okay. And what I mean by that is that as the volcano starts to swell
up, yeah.
What happens is it steepens the slopes. You go to skid like this, then it's steeper, steeper, steeper like that.
Right.
And stuff starts to slide off of it.
Okay.
Because you've
gravity.
steepened the slope.
Yeah, gravity, yeah.
And huge blocks of the rocks up on the top there will come sliding down.
Right.
What that does is it unloads the magma chamber underneath there.
Takes the pressure off.
It takes the pressure, like taking a cap off of a beer or a Coke or something. The gas is inside, and of course steam is the main gas.
Sure.
Because there's water, that mountain is full of water.
Oh, so I know that.
And it makes steam.
Okay.
And the steam, added to everything else that's coming out of that event makes it explode.
So as it's swelling into a more conical shape, those rocks and that slide down, were those at one point before they slid down? Were those kind of holding the cap on?
Well,
So when those start to
Very true.
roll off, I guess there's less holding it down, and that
Yeah,
would.
and that's what happened with St. Helens.
Yeah, that blew out sideways, didn't it?
It
Yeah.
was a flank, what they call a flank eruption. Well, that's what happened. You
Yeah.
see, it unloaded this huge section of the mountain, slid off, uncovered the bare naked magma there, and the water and the magma instantly
They didn't
went
expect
into
that.
steam
There were journalists miles away
that's right.
that got just obliterated.
Yeah.
They expected it to go up. All right, so getting back to Baru, sorry to interrupt you there. Getting back to Baru, so it gets into this conical shape, and the debris and rocks slide down the bottom.
Yeah. And what happens then is that the sudden release of all those gases out of this liquid magma converts it to tiny droplets of liquid that turn into glass. It formed glass.
Oh, that's right.
Because when you it's what they call quenching, a quenching of the magma, and it's the gases added to it make it turn it into a sort of like a vapor. That becomes a cloud of ash.
All right.
A cloud of basically it's tiny droplets. You can imagine a Baja Reiki. Imagine that as droplets of magma.
Oh, yeah.
At the same.
Doesn't sound fun, Paul.
And of course, it's like it's a vapor, and it rises very quickly because it's really, really, really hot. It rises as a cloud, billowing, and it doesn't go straight up because of the winds.
Okay.
The winds here are blowing from the northeast to the southwest usually.
Right.
And so the winds will push the cloud over as it rises. And so it will go up and spread like this. And some of it will actually collapse and come down the sides. The bigger stuff, the bigger bombs or pieces of, big stuff is thrown way up into the air. And that also comes down. The big stuff is closest to the vent, and the smaller and smaller stuff.
As you go out,
The very, very small stuff will rise to about 80,000 feet in the air, and the jet stream picks that up and carries it rapidly downwind.
Yeah. That's over.
And that ash can go all the way around the earth.
Yeah, and we've read about that in the news. The volcanoes in Europe and in the Netherlands closing airports in California. Actually all over the world.
Iceland was one that was in historic time was a big one. Yeah.
So these when this debris when this ash falls, it's not just a sprinkling. It's not like oh, this looks like snow. It's something a lot more insidious than that, isn't it?
And of course, one thing about it is there are occasions where this cloud will, especially if you get what they call a flank eruption, where there's a huge mass of molten rock exposed at the surface, suddenly exposed. It's like it forms this explosive eruption, and it makes a cloud of very, very, very hot gas that starts to flow down the slope of the volcano, very high speed.
Now, is that the pyroclastic?
It's a pyroclastic
flow, and that travels pretty quickly.
Up to 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, so you really can't outrun that.
You're not.
You're not outrunning that.
No, it doesn't matter what condition you're in, you're not going to outrun this thing.
So that comes down the side, and that would, if the flank eruption was in the right spot, that could bury Boquete.
Oh yeah, of course. And the Caldera River was the former. That canyon was the former site of such a flow.
Mm.
We don't know when. I don't. I haven't been able to get anyone to do a date on it.
Right.
But it's very likely prehistoric.
Okay.
But that flow came down what was then the Caldera River Canyon, and it came down it flows very fast down the river valley, and that ran out of steam, literally. You know where the water tanks are, up above on the Caldera River, just above, about a mile above Boquete.
Yeah, up north.
The
but
big
yeah,
water tank.
Right, yeah, on the way to the climbing rock.
The road split right
Yeah,
there.
okay, yeah, we know that.
Okay, that was the end. That is how far it came from the vent way up on the top.
That's pretty far.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And it could just
far.
as well have come further.
So what was the landscape around here like before that?
Well,
Because we've seen, there's pictures available that were taken around the turn of the last century when there was no Boquete. It was just a valley.
oh,
You know,
yeah.
and you can see where the river is. I mean, obviously you can see it doesn't look
Sure.
like it's moved much, right?
Uh-huh.
And you could almost superimpose a modern picture, you know, on top of that, and nothing's really changed, I guess, in 100 years. And 100 years in geological time is a blip.
Yeah.
How would that change the landscape here?
Well, what happened? This pyroclastic flow came down the canyon.
Mm-hmm.
It filled the canyon up. What happens is that as it runs to a certain point where it runs out of it cools very fast
Mm-hmm.
along the edges,
Yeah.
and so it had enough heat and enough material to flow down that canyon, and it was confined to the canyon pretty much. It didn't go out, as far as we know. It didn't go very far outside.
Mm-hmm.
And the columns that you see at the climbing rocks
Right,
up
yeah.
here, those columns are formed by the rapid cooling of that flow. And those columns are formed by contraction as this glass cools.
Mm-hmm.
It contracts, making those columns like that.
That's always fascinated me that they're five-sided. They're perfect
Pentagons.
pentagons, and it's how it looks like someone made that. You know,
Yeah,
some
yeah,
sculptor
yeah.
came by and said, "Okay, let's just let's make pentagons." And even the pieces that are broken off at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
they're perfect. They're perfectly even-sided pentagons,
Yeah.
and that's
Well,
a
you'll
natural.
notice when you go up there, though, you'll notice that they're not flat and straight.
No,
They curve.
they do.
and they're like fingers.
That's why it looks like a work of art.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Now, normally those columns that you see are most often they're vertical,
Right.
because this on a flow is going to be flowing across the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these in the climbing rocks are in some places horizontal,
Yeah.
almost,
Yeah.
and you'll notice that they curve
Yeah.
around. And what's apparently happened is this: the columns normally develop perpendicular to the surface of cooling,
Yeah.
the base and the top.
Right. So it's straight up and down, basically.
Yeah, so they normally are this way.
Yeah.
Well, if they're like this, what happened was this ash flow came down a curving, a snake-like canyon,
Okay.
and it was going around the bends. And so the cooling surface was along the vertical wall.
So right, it wasn't on the base. Okay, I see.
was-
Right, it
of
was
course.
on the.
Now, if you go to the climbing rocks, you can walk over to the right-hand side of it, all the way over in the right-hand side, and you can actually see the base of that ash flow on the harz, on earlier rocks or materials.
Yeah.
And so you can actually see the curved bottom of the flow going down like that, and the columns do this.
And they gradually
Like
go,
that.
yeah. Wow. And then, see, I've got all these pictures that when I get home, I'm
really
going to have to
cool.
go scrolling
Walk
through
over
them.
there. You got to look back in the bushes.
Yeah.
It's not on the face. You
Oh.
have to look to the
Behind,
right of
yeah,
the face,
yeah.
away from it.
So it actually does go back to a perpendicular, and then gradually comes up along the side. Yeah. I remember you telling us on the last field trip we went over there that that's kind of a unique.
Oh yeah.
It's you're not aware of that
I've
particular.
never seen anything like that anywhere in the world, anywhere else in the world. And we've been, I've been all over the world.
Yeah, you've been everywhere, man. You're like that Johnny Cash song.
Hey, no.
All right, so now
It's a cool place.
and this happens every time. I wish we had 2 hours, but I wanted to ask you because a lot of people. Like someone had said to me a few weeks ago, I was giving somebody a ride, and we were going down towards Caldera, the checkpoint, turn down there, and there's a lot of boulders over there. There's a lot of boulders everywhere. And this person made an offhand comment. I would hate to have been standing there when that thing fell out of the sky.
Yeah, well.
And here I go. Now I get into Paul Myers mode, and I'm trying to explain. Well, no, they didn't. They didn't fall from the sky, and of course I get it all muddled up because I'm not a geologist. So how did all those boulders get here if they didn't blow up out of and just sail across the sky and land where they are?
One of the things is that we're abundantly blessed with boulders.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. So we have a Baru is a boulder factory.
Yeah. Yeah, you had mentioned at one point they should rename the town Boulder.
Well, I can take you around and show you, but what happens is that you've got to figure that mountain is a constant source of rocks, and you can see the recent rock slide on this east face of Baru up there.
Yep.
That's brand new. That mountain is collapsing and sliding down, and what you see is humongous pieces of that block that's up there have broken away and fallen down.
Yeah.
Well, then, as they fall and slide, they break up into smaller
pieces. Yeah.
And as they move along, they go down into the river, and the river actually can move them down channel.
Yeah.
If you ever watch the water moving around a boulder in a river, you realize the water undercuts downstream side of it, and the pressure behind it pushes it downstream. So it keeps on. It doesn't matter how big that boulder is.
It'll move, yeah.
And it starts out with flat surfaces and jagged edges and corners. But then you'll notice it won't go even a mile before the corners are knocked off, the edges, and so on, and it starts getting rounded.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people don't realize the destructive power that running water has.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get a foot. Someone told me it was 12 or 15 inches deep of moving water can move a car. Slide it across a parking lot, or off a bridge or something. So all these boulders that are outlying in far from here, Caldera, Los Molinos. I mean, wherever you go here, you see them as far down almost as Dolega or El Francis. Those didn't blow up out of the side of the mountain.
No, they didn't.
Rain rocks down on.
See, one of the things you'll notice when you look at the side view of Baru is that there's two mountains. One with steep sides on it that's all rocky. That's the core of the mountain. And then what we call the Lahar Plain, which is a different angle of slope. When you're driving to David, you're driving down the slope of a whole series of mud flows. That what happened when the eruption happens, steam is emitted. It combines with the loose ash on the slope, and it forms mud.
Is that what a lahar
And
is?
yes.
Okay.
These are almost everything. More than half of that volcano is lahar, stacked one on top of the other.
And that's what we're driving on,
So,
basically, when we're going down
yeah.
towards David.
And so what happens is those boulders that have slid down or been carried down from the mountain source up there
Mhm.
are now become part of a mud flow with these big, humongous boulders the size of a house.
Yeah, I mean, they're huge.
Can be carried along on this mud flow. And what happens, the big pieces tend to float on the top as it moves. And so there's the edge of one. You go down toward Dolega,
Uh-huh.
and you'll see the whole surface strewn with these humongous
Yeah.
boulders.
They're
And,
giant. Cars,
black
houses, yeah.
boulders. Yeah, and what those boulders were carried there by mud flows, one on top of another, and what the mud flows will start out going down the canyons.
Mm-hmm.
They fill up the canyons and start to spill out onto this flat surface, and they heading toward the ocean.
Yeah. And there they
some
sit.
of them can go for miles and miles and miles.
Yeah, well, you see them pretty far down. Okay, I just got a text from somebody who says, what's the explanation for the giant plateau on the left as you're driving down towards David? And I've seen that before. That's and like I said, I know it's not.
I know what you're Mesa.
Mesa. Okay, yeah.
Mesa.
There's it almost seems like someone came with a butter knife and.
I could be flippant and say something, but I really don't know the reason for that. But often that is a combination of two processes. One process that produces a layered rock with a flat surface.
Okay.
And then later, movement of the crust. And you'll notice as you're driving toward David, a whole row of low mountains.
Yeah.
It comes right across the road. It's parallel to the coastline.
Right.
Those are faults.
Like
those
like earthquake faults?
Yeah, they're faults. And what happens is that the coastal plain is collapsing and actually along a series of faults that are tilted toward the ocean. What happens then is that the one side slips down, and it leaves the other one higher.
Okay.
And that or you may even have peat blocks that are raised relative to the ones beside it.
So I know
you get these coastwise faults with these stepwise faults like that produce these ridges that run parallel to the shoreline.
Okay. All right. That makes sense, at least to me.
What I'm saying is that mesa may be such a fault block that had a flat surface. That may be part of the explanation of it. But I have never really gotten down there to look at it.
That's a field trip.
That would make a great field trip.
That would make a great field.
Anytime you want to go, let me know.
I'm still waiting for the other one. Where there's up in Jaramillo, there's you had mentioned that there was a caldera up there that has got like a flat rock base. I can't even remember now. I have to go through my notes. But it was one of the field trips that you had said we would be going up the mountain up there, and it's very difficult to get to. But
that one. That's called La India.
La
I think
India.
you're talking about.
I think so. Yeah.
That's an old vent.
Event, that's what it was. You were going to show us it. I've never actually seen any of this, and you know, damn you, COVID! All these field trips had to be canceled. I had them listed in my calendar. I wanted this one. That's like four or five of them.
Yeah. Well, we're going to resume the field trips, probably very late March or early April. Now you got to realize that we can't run them the same way we had.
Right. Yeah. You can't
we
pack
really
8 people into an SUV.
Pack 5 people into a car, and we're not going to do that. It means then that the field trips will involve fewer people
or more cars.
And well, the trouble is that if we stop on these roads up in the mountains up here,
Mhm.
and there's no parking places,
Right. Yeah.
and so if what I'm probably going to do is limit each car to 4 people
Right.
and take maybe 4 cars.
Right.
But whatever, I'm going to have to take more trips of
Sure.
less people.
Yeah. Yeah. But still, you know, they do fill up fast.
Oh
I
yeah,
just definitely want to remind
they do.
people
They
do.
fill up right away.
I remember, you know, you took us over to the quarry up there off of Volcancito Road.
Yeah, you want to see boulders? That's the place to see boulders.
Yeah.
And one of the things you see a lot of, you realize that there's primary boulders which tend to have sharp edges and corners,
Hmm.
and they haven't come far from their source.
Right.
And then there's the ones that are really, really round, spherical almost.
Right.
They've come a long ways.
Yeah.
And not only that, but a lot of these boulders are actually the rainwater during the rainy season flows down through these boulders like this, and it starts to take leach chemicals out of the boulders.
So they get kind of porous.
And so what happens is it cements the boulders together, and it makes the boulders into concrete.
Wow.
No, yeah. Well, you go up there and take a look at that quarry again, and
Yeah.
you'll notice that that wall, that face they were quarrying out,
Yeah.
is vertical.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just.
Why is it standing vertical? Why isn't it collapsing? Why don't the big boulders fall out of it?
Fall out of it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you have, in order to quarry that thing, you got to use some pretty big equipment.
And get out of the way.
Yeah, out of the way, because they're cemented together.
Wow. Well, yeah, and some of those, you know, I've seen, the only reason I pay attention to these things is because this stuff's very interesting to me. We went on a hike a while back off a caldera somewhere. I can't even remember where it was. It was years ago, and part of the tour, right, was you went under this fence. And I'm not advocating to trespass on private property, so I'm pretty sure that the people who own this field, you know, they're aware of this. But way off into the field, I'd say maybe, you know, 600-700 feet, was this giant boulder sitting in the middle of the field, and there were petroglyphs on it.
Oh yeah, that's down at Caldera.
Caldera, right?
Yeah.
And that's how old is that? Basically, I mean, I know you can't pinpoint, you know, March 27th, you know, but about how old are those?
What, the petroglyphs or the boulders?
Yeah. Well, the boulders, we don't know, right? Because you said it could have been from any.
They're older than the petroglyphs.
They're older than the, obviously, right?
For sure.
But how old are the petroglyphs, and were those?
Well, I would say probably early Paleolithic would be about the maximum. So, whatever that is, probably less than 1 million years.
Well, okay, so they've been there for a little while.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's you know, I was.
Now some of those boulders are the size of this building, you know.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you mention that, because we were I've been on so many hikes here, and my memory isn't what it should be, but I remember on one of them, and it might not even have been a hike, it might have been a drive to Bocas, you know, but I remember looking out the car window, because we'd stop to take pictures. You know, why did it take you 8 hours to get to Bocas? Because we stopped every half a mile. Look at that vista, look at that.
Yeah.
But there was something that it looked to me like it was a little hill. Well, it was a hill. And as we come around the bend, the backside of it, it wasn't a hill. It was a giant boulder. One side, I guess the sun side, was covered with moss, and then
that's over on the road over toward Lucero. They have a big cut up there on the top where they were clearing land for a new subdivision, and I think they had cleared it, and they got to this one humongous boulder. It's the size of a building.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it was completely surrounded by volcanic ash and other boulders equally big. and it was, I would say, 20 feet long.
Yeah, it was giant. It was
Yeah.
it was good, at least twice the length of my car.
Yeah, I took a picture of my buddy. We go exploring together, and he 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 got underneath it like this.
Like he's
making
holding it
look like
up.
He was holding it up.
Atlas, right?
Yeah. The boulder was, he looks like a little ant by
Compared to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is such a geographically diverse area,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and just from the field trips that we've taken, and me Googling stuff, obviously as an amateur, what's this in layman's terms? How long was this here? How long was that there? And then, we go on these field trips, that you have, and you get a more detailed explanation of this is why this is this way. And I remember we went up to someone's house up there, and
That's right.
in Jaramillo. It was in the backyard of where Dr. Jennifer
That's
Daniels used to
That's
live.
right. Yeah.
Even that little cut in the side was a whole lesson.
Yeah.
It was, with the different colors and what things meant. And it's really fascinating that you can live in an area like this and not be aware of all the history here.
And that leads to one important point, I think, and that is that probably the most important thing for these trips that we do is that you learn how to read the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the landscape, because the history of an area is clearly revealed many times, certainly here in this area, by a careful study of the landscape. You can actually see that one thing has come before this, and that came before that, and that had to be there before this. And so you can put together a sequence of things. Like, for instance, the various channels of the Caldera River. There are places, like I told you about this ash flow that came down the Caldera River Canyon.
Yeah.
That dammed the canyon. It formed a small lake back there behind it that every once in a while would flood, and the flood channels are clearly visible going up the road, up the hill there from the city of Boquete. You can see such side channels that were rapidly carved away by the floodwaters coming out of that small lake.
Now, is that a prehistoric lake, or is it still there?
The lake is not there, but
the evidence of it.
But the evidence, yes, is still there very clearly.
Wow. I know that going up, we were going on one of the field trips I went on. We were going up that road up north, and it's a winding road.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come around a right-hand turn, and you see this wall of rock, the rock wall that seems to go on for a kilometer or so, and it looks to be about 200-300 feet high.
Yeah.
And it's just flat. It's a wall. It's just a rock wall, but it's huge. And I don't know how big it is, but judging from the size of the trees on the top, it looks pretty significant.
Yeah. That is the ash flow. That's that ash flow I was telling you about. That's the same one that you see at the Climbing Rocks.
So that's all It's all connected. Yeah.
It dammed the river to a depth of 200 feet.
Wow.
It was a single flow, 200 of ash, hot ash.
200 feet deep.
200 feet deep.
Traveling 1,000 miles an hour.
Because the columns go all the way from the river all the way up to the top of that cliff.
Yeah, and
over
that's
200 feet.
I figured it was pretty steep.
So those columns, that was a single cooling unit. You see, it wasn't a series of things. It was one unit, and so that dammed the river valley. So what's the river do? It moves over.
It moves over.
So now it's flowing right along the edge of what was the original canyon.
So the Caldera River moved.
That's right. It moved over.
And where it's now, that's very interesting. And
because of the fact that the ash flow itself is real hard rock. hard rock. And whereas the lahar underneath it is a bunch of ash with boulders in it, it's easily eroded. So what the river does is it just starts to flow along the edge where the
hard rock is.
Where the hard rock is into the softer stuff beside it. So the modern river just follows the trace of the old canyon that was filled by that ash flow.
That's very interesting. And you know, we are. Wow, we're just about out of time.
Oh, darn.
I know, right?
We're going to have to do this again soon.
We are going to have to do this again because I had like a million more questions.
Yeah, and I want to have a chance to talk about some of the trips we're planning.
Yeah, well, why don't we have you back on in a few weeks or so, and we can do a whole show about, how to sign up, where they're going and all that. I think that would be good.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, because they do fill up quick. But it's really interesting to hear about that. And I know we spent most of our time today basically answering questions, but I definitely want to get to the meat of the field trips and what is it. So with that, thank you again.
You're most welcome,
Dr. Paul Myers, really tired. Retired professor of geology. Always a real pleasure to have you on the show. Next week we have Mark Rosenbach from the ACCB. We're going to talk about what they're doing next month. And the week after that we got Jim Cavney. Jim Cavney is a herpetologist. He's a snake expert. And we're going to talk about reptiles and what's going on here. It's going to be an interesting show. In the meantime, thank you again, Paul, for coming. You've been listening to BoqueteNOW Talk Radio on Radio Cherokee 103.3 FM, sponsored by Big Daddy's Grill and the ACC Boquete. Y'all have a great and wonderful weekend.